Humor is something that is very subjective and depends on everybody's own personal tastes. Some people can find animals doing backflips funny, and others think that the crate challenge was a funny trend. So naturally, within video games, how players find certain aspects funny is down to the player themselves. Writers and developers try to add comic relief characters in stories so that they can increase their chances of getting a laugh out of the player, like Sans Undertale and Claptrap from Borderlands. But the risk with banking all the humor in one character is that it can become, well, cringe in some cases. However, there is one game that has one of the most unique senses of humor that I've witnessed in a video game, namely Resident Evil 4. Look, Resident Evil 4 is an amazing game and one of my all-time favorites, and I'll be making a retrospect about it quite some time from now, but for now, let's talk about Resident Evil 4's sense of humor. That is a sentence I never expected to read out loud, but here we are. Also, thanks to the support on the recent video about Dark Souls and for reaching 50 subscribers, it means a lot. And a quick update, I started a Patreon and I have a Twitter, and there'll be more info about that at the end of the video, but let's get into the humor of Resident Evil 4.
Okay, let me guess. She's the president's daughter?
That's too good for a guess.
Resident Evil does have some really, and I mean it, goofy dialogue. From Jill Sandwich and whatever other phrase was said in the first Resident Evil, there are some funny quotes that the characters say. But the thing to understand here is that it's not just what the characters were saying is funny, but the delivery too. Back in 1996, Capcom had to hire English voice actors within Japan to do the voice work, meaning that the talent pool was limited from the get-go. But with this poor voice acting and questionable writing, Resident Evil started a trend of goofy dialogue that is still going strong today in Resident Evil Village through Ethan Winters. But between Resident Evil 1 and Resident Evil Village, there is Resident Evil 4, quite possibly the magnum opus of Capcom's writers' wacky dialogue in the entire franchise. Whenever people think about the dialogue in Resident Evil 4, all the looks go straight to Leon and whatever he said, but I'll save that just for a bit. But rather talk about the other stuff that the characters have said and what makes it become comic. The main reason I believe what helps the writing become a masterclass in humor is the contrast of the atmosphere and the expressions of the characters. Resident Evil 4 starts off with Leon narrating his experience in Raccoon City, reciting his close calls with death, the fall of Umbrella by the stock market, and his mission of rescuing the president's daughter from a crazed cult in rural Spain. For any unamusing player, this is a very good setup for a semi-serious plot, but what's this? Leon is doing small talk with the Spanish police? Singing Kumbaya at some Boy Scout bonfire? Parking tickets? Just after a couple of minutes with a serious tone, the game throws it out of the window and goes for this campy nature, and I love it. What the game does well is that it shows the goofy dialogue right at the start of the game, rather than saving it for later. Think about it, if Resident Evil 4 did not have this dialogue stuff and kept its serious tone all the way until we met Ashley, for instance, before bringing out the funnies, the game's tone could quite upset a few people and be off-putting for some. And that's what the game manages to do with its dialogue, creating some well-crafted serious beats sprinkled in with some funny shenanigans between them. But enough about the specifics. What are some of the funniest pieces of dialogue? The Spanish officers joking about the parking tickets is a good one, and Ashley crying for Leon once you turn your back on her is... well, that one's a bit more annoying than funny, I guess, but of course there is Leon, and whatever this guy says manages to get a reaction out of you, be it the many times he talks about, well, anything. And now is the time for me to talk about the other one factor that links the goofy nature of Resident Evil 4 together. I was talking about how there's a contrast between the serious nature and the campy humor, so I guess you could say that they work as a pair together. However, the serious tone of the game is secondary when the slapstick nature of the game kicks in, overshadowing the serious tone only for a short while before the game resumes to the usual survival horror. Like I have alluded to in the previous segment, the comedic nature revolves around one character, Leon. Leon is written to work as a pair and having his interactions with the other characters be funny to experience, and this also shows how Capcom wants the comedic nature to be presented. Focused. Most of the interactions in the game work in duos, meaning that there's always a constant dialogue between Leon and the other character he is interacting with. Some of the things we find funny are interactions. Take stand-up, which is an interaction between the comedian and the audience, and the same applies here, Leon with another character. The way Leon interacts with the other characters creates this comic relief scenario with Leon being the center of all the goofiness, and often manages to bring the serious characters down, or up, however you see it, to his higher level of banter. Take the most iconic interaction, Leon and Salazar. This duo combination has given us some of the best quotes from the game.
Maybe you have 9 lives, but it doesn't matter now, Mr. Kennedy. I've sent my right hand to dispose of you.
Your right hand comes off?
It's also just that the contrast of the characters, which is quite funny. Leon being a super agent and Salazar being an old man that barely looks like a teen. Leon is the life of the party, and although this cheesy dialogue manages to get us to laugh, the other characters also start laughing at some of the stuff Leon says. Sadler chuckles at one of the dumb jokes Leon makes, and this is actually quite crucial to maintaining the humor of the game. For us, we can laugh at the dumb stuff being said in the game as we are experiencing it. However, the characters are also experiencing it in the game, so when another character reacts to it, it gives the joke a bigger impact on us the player, as sometimes, if we find something funny and no one else is giving off a reaction in like a friend group or something, we could end up suppressing and convincing ourselves that, hey, I guess that wasn't funny after all. The fact that the other characters in the game also react to Leon is the writers telling us that, yeah, just go ahead, laugh, they find this just as ridiculous as you do. Leon has said some of the funniest quotes in gaming, and we must thank Capcom for that, because this B-movie goofiness is hilarious given the context. We have the infamous village scene of asking about bingo of all things, Leon mispronouncing Lewis's death, literally calling Lewis as he's dying, and the no thanks bro to Salazar, and so much more. But you might be thinking, Leon isn't the only guy that says funny things, as there are instances where Leon isn't present and they still manage to crack jokes. And you're right, and this links to how I said that the humor works in pairs here. Take Louise and Ashley. Louise says some stuff clearly hitting on Ashley and her appearance, the quote, ballistics. Even Capcom is still joking about the same. They named a trophy for rescuing Ashley, and I kid you not, I just discovered this while making the video, securing the ballistics. And what baffles me even more is that only 47.3% of players have this achievement on Steam, so if you haven't played Resident Evil 4 up until this point, I highly recommend that you do, and if you have played Resident Evil 4, how far have you come, or if you've beaten it, and did you enjoy it? Comment down, just comment it down below, but yeah. Ashley also has her fair share of funny moments, for one, hitting on Leon at the end of the game, asking for overtime. I swear this is real. This is so corny and it feels like there's some kind of love triangle here, but if I had to draw this like love triangle, it would look like a hexagon. So if you're catching my drift, the game is completely off the rails in terms of what the characters are saying to each other. Classic banter and teasing between them, something that we as humans find amusing, and just completely random things that you wouldn't expect to be said amidst a cult village attack. However, we can't just talk about Resident Evil 4's dialogue to understand humor, and we need to look at what is actually going on in the game to understand and bring it all together. We have now been analyzing, dissecting, and comprehending the importance of the balance between Resident Evil 4's wild sense of wit and its serious tone. I did mention earlier that these comedic moments came after long stretches of serious gameplay in the form of cutscenes. Well, that's not entirely the case, as even in Resident Evil 4's gameplay there is a lot of bizarre or weird things that happen, and if you put stuff like this in The Last of Us, for example, it just wouldn't work. From the very beginning, we have Leon's interaction with the very first Ganado, the enemies of the game. Leon enters the house without knocking or saying anything, walks up to him and asks him in English, "Have you seen this girl?" How does the Ganado reply? He starts swearing at him in Spanish. Being able to understand both these languages makes this interaction very amusing, as for one, Leon is in a foreign country asking a random civilian in a language that he probably doesn't understand whether he has seen this girl. This might just be me, I just find this funny, as I doubt that's how a super agent would act on a rescue mission. Speaking of Leon, how he acts with the Ganados, how would you fight the Ganados in the battle? I'll give you 3 options. A, you take them out with your gun. B, you try to take them out using your surroundings. Or C, you run away, because really that is the most rational option to do in a situation like this. So if you chose option D, suplex them and roundhouse kick them, you'd be correct. I don't know how effective this would be in an actual apocalypse or actual like village attack, and I watched a GameRanks video recently where they also commented on how bizarre this is in the context of the game, so I'm glad I'm not the only one who finds this amusing, but for a bit I was thinking about whether the Krauser knife fight fits into the same category of these strange things too, and the more I think of it, it kinda does. The Krauser knife fight. For one, Leon could have just used one of the many weapons on hand to take Krauser out. Krauser, who had all intentions of taking Leon out, decides to host a TED Talk mid-battle, coupled along with the quick time events. This moment is quite iconic. The last final thing that directly involves Leon is, well, this. Yeah, are you seeing this? But moving on. There are more things that are wild, involving some of the other characters, and one of them is the Merchant. Having the Merchant as a concept is really cool, encouraging players to gather resources, save them, in order to buy and upgrade their equipment. However, the concept of the Merchant gets a bit weird. First, the Merchant has an accent that is not native to rural Spain or American. How'd he get there? What is he doing there? You can't even unalive the Merchant, and you won't be able to buy things from him. No, when I said, yeah, you can unalive the Merchant, and you can't buy things from him when he's unalived, until he shows up at the next designated Merchant spot. Although I might be a bit harsh criticizing the continuity of how the Merchant actually works, which is quite bizarre, I'm a big fan of this character, and his mysterious and funny nature is fun to think about in game. The final thing which adds to the bizarre and humorous nature of Resident Evil 4 is it's part of most Resident Evil games, and this comes in full force with the unlockables. Of course, we can talk about how funny the costumes are in game, how funny it is to see Ashley as a pop star walking around with a knight armor that probably weighs like a ton, but it's also the interactions from it. I haven't been able to try this in game, but when Ashley has to jump down to Leon and when she's wearing the knight armor, Leon will stagger back a bit and holds his back in pain from catching Ashley in a heavy knight armor. That's dedication on terms of Capcom, but of course there are more funny things to be had from the unlockables, like Leon reloading the Chicago typewriter by simply tilting his hat, or the fact that there is a plague removal laser 412 which can just insta-kill any enemy infested with the Plagas. I mean, if he brought that from the start, I mean, that would just, like, make the whole situation easier, I guess, but overall, what we can take from this section is that these small things sprinkled throughout the game of RE4 helps make this funny sense of humor the game has normal to the player in a sense, and that there is a constant flow of goofiness throughout.
Where's everyone going? Bingo?
Although most of my other videos have been more critical and analytical of the topics that I've discussed, this one has been a lot more lighthearted and less critical, but I'm not sure if there's that much for me to conclude. RE4's sense of humor is top tier, with some of the cheesiest dialogue a game has to offer, creating a dual tone that contrasts the very grim nature of the actual setting of the game. The game manages to take itself seriously, but in a comical fashion, and shows a lighthearted B-movie way of how heroes would act in a situation like this. I'm not sure what else to say other than, if you want to play a game that has a unique sense of humor like no other, I'd say Resident Evil 4 is a great game for that. Great gameplay, cool setting, and lots of quotes with high meme potential. And with that, welcome to the end of the video. I hope that you found this video enjoyable, as this topic is not as analytical as my other videos are, but it was fun to make. But before I keep up with the usual outro format, time for some self-promotion. I have started a Patreon where you can support me if you feel like it. I'm not really sure how to promote a Patreon, but it's in my About section and in the description of this videos and all further future videos. And I'll be doing some extra stuff there when the time comes and if people actually start supporting me there, but for now it's there. I also have a Twitter, which I will also be adding in the description. I tweet quite regularly, I think, so give me a follow there if you want to hear some of my quick takes and stuff. But yeah, this video was fun to make, and any support or critiques are appreciated. So right now, I just finished the main game of Cuphead and the DLC. It's just phenomenal. I love the animations, I love the difficulty. It's probably one of the best indie games of all time. Top 5 indie games of all time. Top 20 games of all time for me. I hope that made sense. Did I mix up the numbers? But yeah, anyways, it was just an amazing experience all around. The DLC might even be one of the candidates for Game of the Year even, but that's how good it is. And only for like $8, so I'd definitely recommend it. But yeah, have a good rest of your day, and I hope to see you in the next one. So with that, Storm out.